Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending this presentation with technical information on leveraging your existing data with Autodesk Vault. My name is Brian Verboort, and I'll be leading you through the process, showing you tools, utilities, and workflows that you can use to get existing data that you might have in either on servers or on, and maybe even in another data management tool to leverage that stuff into the Autodesk Vault environment. First of all, I'll introduce you to who we are if you're unfamiliar with M2 Technologies. We are a manufacturing technology consulting firm, been in the business for several years, focused on locations here on the East Coast, but we have access customers and services as well as staff across the US, and we've even got an extended office in Europe. We're a Microdesk partner, although we're focused more specifically and intentionally on the manufacturing industry. We do have a partnership with Microdesk, which leads us to the ability to assist customers that might span across industries. So if you happen to be a building manufacturing company that makes building components, or you work across industries yourself in your businesses, our partnership with Microdesk allows us to have experts in all of those industries, and we just bring the right technical staff to bear on your issue or problem, including those that are related to the adoption of technology that spans the industries. We service and support and train and consult with companies in manufacturing, building information modeling. There's asset management that we provide to our customers as well, process optimization for whatever workflows you might have in place or hoping to get in place in your organization. And we are also incredibly focused on data management, which is hopefully why you're here today viewing this presentation. Because we can't be complete experts at everything, we have relationships with best-in-class business partners already. This allows us to have existing relationships we can leverage and work between companies that would allow us to provide you essentially anything you might need, kind of an end-to-end solution that would allow you to source your needs, whatever those might be, from a single business. We also do software development, designer automation. Got a development team that is on staff that we leverage to create customizations where products may not exist to meet your needs. We also are focused on generative design as an emerging technology that would then, we could teach you how to use and adopt that technology in your organization to help with sustainability and the protection of the earth moving forward and using those resources responsibly and renewably. We also, as a manufacturing company, would be neglectful if we didn't provide visualization and CAM services related to the products that you design and are trying to sell. We also have internal CIO advisory services that would allow you to maybe focus on more of what your job should be and you want to be working on, as opposed to infrastructure issues and development and building those infrastructures out in your organization. Again, allowing you to hopefully just focus in on what you think, the things you do best and the things that you got into business to do. You can also provide structure in the form of standards development for your company, so that you've got cross departmental standardization and even across maybe multiple divisions for your organization, centralizing and implementing on standards. Our agenda for today will be stepping through the source data that you might be trying to import into an existing, into a new or an existing Vault implementation. We'll talk about reviewing the integrity of that data and how you can get a look at it to see what the integrity is of that data. In many cases, you might have some older data that has questionable integrity, missing links, things of that nature. We'll talk a little bit about how to expose those things and assist you in identifying how bad the problem might be if there is an issue, or how good it might be and how easy it might be to make the transition without much effort. We'll also be going through the process of uploading that source data. Once that data is uploaded, the management of that source data beyond the implementation or the import and transition of that information. We'll also, at the end of the meeting or call today, we'll be doing a quick discussion with regards to if what you see me presenting here today doesn't seem to meet your needs, what can you do next? What resources are available to you through us or even internally with your own organization that you can use to maybe do some advanced processing of that data? That might be your requirement. There are some prerequisites that need to be in place before you start importing information into your Vault environment. So I'm going to start out right at the beginning, and that would be with the Autodesk Data Management Server console. There are some things that you'll need to be aware of before you start trying to import data. So in this case, I'll just authenticate myself with administrative permissions into my data management server. And I'll just point out kind of where we're starting from here. I do have a Vault that's been created for us. And we're going to be using the Vault called Acme, just as a general purpose company name without offending anyone. That is the Vault we're going to be importing data into. Although you can see I have other Vaults here, and you can have various Vaults in your organization for testing purposes, et cetera. But this will be the Vault that we're importing into. Give you a little bit of background on that. One of the things that you're going to need, and even to get this far, you'll need administrative permissions. But the importing process and the utility that we use for importing also requires administrative processes, or administrative permissions, I should say. So if we go into administration here on the Vault server side and managing access, I'll be using this administrator account that has the administrator role. So know that you won't get very far in this import process without those permissions. So obviously, people that are doing this have the potential to really make a mess of things, potentially, if they just don't know what they're doing. So the training on how to use this, how the import utility works, is important to have, and we'll provide that to you as you need it. But you also need permissions. As goes along with that power comes responsibility. So in this case, I've got that account configured already, and it's all set for us to use. There will be a point during this presentation where if you had forgotten to do that and were logged in with an account that didn't have administrative permissions, you would be halted in the process, and it's fairly deep into the workflow here. So when that occurs, and the last thing you want to do is do some work in the process of mapping the data into the new server, et cetera, and then have a halting event that keeps you from moving further forward again, and then having to reset your permissions and then go back and do another run at it with admin permissions. So something to be aware of before you get started. Make sure you got what you need. The other thing that I would say is that you're going to have some source data somewhere, likely on a shared folder on a server somewhere. If you don't have permissions to that directory with this particular account, as you start with your user account, I should say, your Windows permissions account, then you'll have a real hard time even getting access to that data that you're trying to import. So just up front, try to make sure that you've got administrative permissions to the Vault and to the shared location on the server that you might be working from, so that you don't have issues again with a lack of read-write. We will just be pulling data, so it really just needs to be a read access to that directory. So it does need to be administrated. With that said, We've kind of got the things that are important to us in the data management server console here, kind of walked through those things. So I'll go ahead and just close up the data management server console for now. All right, the next thing that we're going to want to do is that we want to launch a utility that gets installed with the Vault client. So if you don't have the Vault client installed, you're going to want to do that as well before you get too far here. And that's only because you're going to need to be seeing the data and working with the data from a client perspective and not necessarily from an administrative perspective. So that utility is called Autoloader. And again, if you've installed the Vault client on the workstation that you're working from, you'll find it listed, and it's probably just easiest to find by typing some or all of the word using the Windows key. So in this case, I've typed a couple characters of Autoloader, and you'll see it brings up the Autoloader, in this case for the 2022 Vault environment. When I launch that utility, it brings up a splash screen with some things that you are going to want to strongly consider. Although the data that we're going to be loading to the Vault isn't data that we're actually moving, so the workflow is to actually the tool makes a copy of the data, and we'll see more details of that, and that's actually what the software is working against. And I'll have some best practices comments when we get to that portion of the presentation. But it's important, if you were to take some data and add it to the Vault, and there was already data there, and you'd done something incorrect that you really just wished you could undo, or to try again, you just don't want to take an existing Vault environment that's in production and throw a bunch of stuff in there without doing a backup of that Vault environment first. So that's really what this is saying. Look, you're probably going to want to do, before you start doing a bulk loading of data into an existing Vault environment, if you've got that Vault environment set up and working the way you want it to, and you're just trying to add information or data to it, do a backup with it. Do a backup on that data before you do the autoloading, especially if you're unfamiliar with the process. And look, if you've got a test server that you can use, all the better, so you can get a sense of how the tool works, get some practice with it. It's not difficult. It's just you just don't want to mess with your production environment, put some of that stuff at risk, and wish you could have gotten back to a known point in time. I'll choose next here after being advised that you probably should have a backup for Vault. And it's going to be prompting me now, this autoloader is going to be prompting me for the data source. And this would be the actual folder that you probably have somewhere, a group of folders that are out in your environment, network environment somewhere. So I'll be doing just that. I've got a folder that's got various types of data in it. And I'll make sure that I run out and grab that. Let's see, of course, I'm having a hard time finding it. There we go. So I've just conveniently called that directory that has a lot of CAD data and other various types of data stored in it. That folder, its subfolders, and the subfolders of the subfolders, the architecture that's in that folder, this source shared folder is going to be uploaded. And we have ways we can load some of it or not. We'll go through that process now. So my folder is conveniently named shared source folder. When I select that, it takes a look at the data that's in that directory and subfolders of that directory, and it determines whether or not there's specifically some inventor data in there. If it finds inventor parts, assemblies, and drawings, it also then goes and looks further to see if there's a project file associated with those inventor documents. So what's happened here is that it has looked into that directory and it's found a project file that's in use, or appears to have been in use at some point when the data was created. So in this case, it's telling us there are several different document types with design data, but it also has a project file called designs. And the check mark means that it's a currently active Inventor project. So if I've got Inventor open in the background, it happened to be a project that's active in my environment. It also could be that there are just project files that are found in the selected folder and it's not currently the active project in Inventor. And that's really what the difference is here between these two. It's saying, look, a project or multiple project files were found in the selected folder. And it's going to use that information to keep the data integrity or test the data integrity of those documents during the auto-loading process. And so if you have multiple project files in that directory, then you can browse to and select the one you want to use for this particular process of auto-loading that data. I'll choose next to move through the process, and it's simply giving us a preview or a review in a way of the information in the hierarchy, the folders, and where that folder pathing is taking place, where it's coming from. You can see that there is, subdirectories listed here and their contents. So as it parses the directory structure, it's really just showing us what it's found so that you can make a determination whether you've navigated to the correct folder for your auto-loading efforts. The next step in the process is to do an integrity scan on the data. And you can see that the data here is varied. It has AutoCAD data, it's AutoCAD electrical data, there's PowerPoint files, there's zip files, there's PDF documents, and the autoloader is capable of loading essentially everything it finds in those directories. It does do integrity checking though on those that are specific to documents with hierarchy. So if I have Inventor designs, for example, in this folder structure somewhere, it will look to see if there are missing references in that data. The way it does that is with a scan. So simply we're going to start the scan process here. And we'll check the documents against one another and against references that might be made in them. So in this case, you'll start to see errors in the validation. So down here at the bottom, we're starting to see some errors show up in the validation and also some warnings in the scan. And so it's found some things that it's not real happy with. Just as an example here, it's finding 73 errors in the validation out of 438 documents. And so it scanned 438 documents that had the potential to have references, but there are 37 problems in that grouping of data. It's also found some warnings in the scan. So what's the difference between an error and a warning? Well, an error will keep us from moving forward. Notice that the next button is not active for me at this time because you don't want this data auto-loaded if it's got problems with integrity. So there are some cleanup that might need to be done on some of this data, but you can make the determination as to what that is. One of the great things that this tool provides us at this early step in the process is the ability to scan your data for integrity problems. So if I'm not really even ready to start loading the vault, I don't want any surprises. You might go through and take a look at the data. Maybe you've got multiple folders here and there or different servers in your organization. And you're kind of confident in maybe some of them, but some of those folders that have just been abandoned over the years and have old junk data in them, you're not even really too confident that data is valuable. So you could at least check the integrity to see what the challenges might be that you have to overcome in the process of doing this loading. So in this case, I could, from right at this point, do an export, and what it will do, it will make a document for me, Excel spreadsheet, etc., that tells me what the issues were that were found. You'll notice there's a combination of successful parsing and document opening going on here. but there's also some things that have issues. So there's parents that are missing children is the most common scenario. So this could be written out to a report, and you could stop your process right here and use that report as kind of a task list to go through and maybe do some reconciliation on some of those issues and errors. Where something's been renamed, you can go in and fix that naming, and you come back here and you run in the scan. So I can continue to scan or rescan also with this dialog box left open, which is kind of helpful. So I can test the progress that I'm making. As we know, if one child component's missing, it could have potentially an impact on many parent components. So solving one problem can cascade into solving many with one small adjustment. So you don't necessarily want to go through this whole process again from the beginning to get to this point. So we can scan and then rescan if we're making efforts in the background to resolve the issues that we're seeing come up. So creating that export report, it really allows you to start seeing the situation that you might have in front of you, and to determine what things you care about and what other things that might be identified as issues that just aren't a problem. In our case, I'll go through the process of another process other than solving them as we go here. I could actually just dismiss them and put the data into the vault that we can, that has integrity. So it's going to be just a bit tedious because there's 73 of these documents to resolve. But you can see I have an option here right next to where I create the report, and that would be to remove the offending documents. I guess maybe I should speak a little bit more about those issues. There are issues in children, but you'll also notice that there are some, one of the differences between an issue and a warning, or an error and a warning, is a warning is just informational. You see I've got a couple warning results in there, and what those are is typically duplicate files. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You can certainly have, and there are many workflows that introduce the notion of duplicate named documents in separate folders. Doing copy design sometimes will result in that kind of a situation. But there's not necessarily anything wrong with duplicate files if that's part of your workflow. But you also might want to know about it, and you can get that information out of the system here. Are they duplicate files? Is that an intended outcome, or is that duplicate file an actual issue? But the system won't halt you from going forward just because you've got duplicate documents, duplicately named documents in the vault. In fact, if you don't want them to be duplicately named, but you want to rename them, it's sometimes easier to put them in the vault, and you let the vault itself help you, because as you rename those documents, the relationships will be preserved. That's one of the beautiful things about the vault. You'll watch as file names and locations change, and it keeps the integrity of the document references. So the warnings in the scan don't necessarily keep me from moving forward, but these errors are. So I'm going to use the option to remove the offending document. You can see the document over here on the left has the check mark next to it. So all these documents with check marks are error documents. And so I'm going to go ahead and just go through the process of removing those files. There is also a possibility, you can see that in that error message, that it would remove parent objects, right? So if I got a child that's missing, then it won't let the parent go in without the references that's required. So I'll just speedily kind of go through here and remove. Remove several of these along the way. You can see that the count is changing as I go, as I remove the offending documents that we need to maybe take a closer look at later. You'll start to see the file count of documents with issues reduce. So, and you'll see it go down in increments as well, simply because of the pairing that we've kind of already spoken about. So I'll make a point here to say, okay, look, we're down to 10 documents here. Now we're down to 4 because of the pairings that have happened. With some of the children has affected some of the parents, and so there's fewer items with a problem. Get down to where we got 0. Notice now that the next button is here. And this workflow is okay, but again, I would suggest that you probably want to do the export the report first and maybe work on those documents offline in order to kind of clean them up. Go ahead and select next. And we're now going to be asked to authenticate ourselves into the vault we're trying to load to. So this is a scenario where we're now being asked to log into the vault where we have permissions to load the data to. You notice that this would probably be an issue now, right? If I get this far and I put in credentials that don't have administrative permissions, I would be halted at this point. It would tell me, look, you can't load stuff into the vault without administrative rights and permissions. That vault doesn't have, you don't have a permission, administrative account permissions for that particular vault. So I'll just use the Acme Vault. We're going to be loading into the Acme Vault. Please select OK to authenticate myself. And again, as it checks, it would halt me now. I would go through all that process first if I hadn't caught it early, and I'd now be informed that you don't have permissions, can't enter that vault. There would also be a message provided regarding duplicate file names. So if you've got your vault setting to allow duplicate file names turned off, so you're not allowing duplicate file names. So in the vault control environment, you can say, look, we don't want duplicate files in our vault. We don't want people to check in a file to the vault environment if there's a file in the vault that already has that name. And you'd be notified now about that as well. So it's important to make sure that before you autoload, not only having administrative permissions, but having the allow duplicate file names turned on. And it's for the very purpose that I said earlier, where we're talking about, let's load this data in, even if there's duplications, and that's a mistake we want to correct. Well, don't keep me from loading it into the vault because of that. Let's let it get it into the vault and let the vault utility and capabilities that are built in there help us resolve that naming issue. So hopefully that helps make sense as to why the file naming, duplicate file naming, is a requirement for auto loading, and the fact that you need to have that disabled. It needs to allow duplicate file names to get into the vault in order to help you get it where you needed to adopt it, update it. In this case, we've got some mapping to do. So where in the vault do I want to put this group of data? Well, I've got a kind of a heading here, a top level item that I'm going to map to. And it's just a designs folder. Think of it like the root folder in that shared directory on your network. So this might be the engineering folder, and you drill down in from the engineering to customer names or project names and product names, etc. So this would be a fairly high level location, but it could be anywhere. It doesn't have to be at the top level as you see me doing here. So I'm just going to put this engineering data essentially in a folder called designs, and that's just our terminology that we would we use in my Acme Corporation here. This is kind of in this directory or all of its subfolders is where we store our design data. So achieving that mapping is important. You can see that it's working along with me. It's showing me with the light blue coloring the things that are the folders that don't exist in the vault already. Those things that will be, this folder will be created and the data will be placed in the folder to support the effort, your check-in effort. So in this case, we've got the content files. Well, this one's already mapped. That's a known requirement for AutoCAD, or sorry, for Inventor. So we don't have to map that, but there's a library mapping here that probably should be taken care of. We've got libraries in the data that we're checking in, library documents in a library folder, and we want to support that and have those things get mapped correctly into the library's location in Vault. It's a little bit odd because you don't pick on the name here. I'll just point this out very deliberately. You pick on the little ellipsis button here, and that allows you to make the mapping to a folder or a subfolder. So as expected, it's going to be adding things into this new mapping for the libraries that we created. Now, the next step in this process is to take that data and prepare it for uploading. We're not to the point where we're ready to upload it yet. We're mapping where it goes into the vault. The next step, and you kind of get a preview of it here in the lower left-hand corner, it's going to basically be saying, look, we're going to be copying the source data. We don't want to alter, touch, manipulate, adjust your source data in any way. We're going to be making a copy of that data, and that data will then be, the copy in the data will be tested. And then once it passes the test to make sure it matches exactly what we're checking, what we're adding to the source data that we're coming from, then it will allow us to start doing the next step in the process for autoloading. You can see it's very deliberate here, and it's very methodical about its procedure. So I could make that directory something besides the C temp folder. If I had another drive that had more space, or that had faster disks on it, maybe SSD rather than the traditional spin drives, it might be something to consider. Just depends on how big your data sets are and how much data is in each byte that you're taking. So in this case, I will change the mapping. I'll just simply select next, although you could browse for another location. So you notice it's copying the information. Once that copy is made, as I mentioned just a minute ago, it will be parsed and checked against the source information. I've never had a failure occur at this point in the process, but I do take some comfort in the fact that I'm getting good data into the vault, and it's good from many perspectives. It's not something somebody accidentally kicked the cord out of the wall while it was trying to auto load. That will just simply fail and ask you to try again. And once you've restored the cord to the outlet, then it would be successful. This is also a good point. Once that data has been captured, that copy has been made and has been tested, and it successfully passed that testing, we want to give some consideration to what we might want to be doing with the source data we're loading from. Because don't forget, we're leaving that source data out there in that shared folder that you might be working off of. And the last thing we want to do is have people start making changes to those documents at this point, because then they're going to be changing files that aren't vaulted. And we're loading data into the vault, and we want them to transition to stop working off of that drive over to working in the vault where that data's new home is. And so a lot of times what we'll do is do things, consider maybe creating a quarantine folder or a folder called loaded or something like that on that source drive. So you can move the source data off and out of the way, kind of sequester it, kind of quarantine it, so that maybe that folder, you create a folder called loaded, auto-loaded, something like that. And you don't really give anybody in the organization access to that directory. But yet you still have that source data that gives you some comfort. And you could reconcile and make sure that things had gone the way you'd hope they'd gone once the data is loaded into Vault. Maybe keep that data in the background somewhere, unaccessible, essentially. So you don't have people working on the copy of the data that was made and added to Vault inadvertently. At some point, there's a cutover here, where people are going to be working out of the Vault instead of off the drive. And so it makes it a good idea. It's probably a good idea to make that a very deliberate and something that people don't have to think about. If they can't get to it, they can't change it. And oh, that's right, we use the Vault now. So in this case, we've passed the testing, the copy's been made and the testing is passed. It, again, in very deliberate fashion, shows us the hierarchy, the folders, the documents that have been added or that are been copied. Again, you're kind of seeing the copy view here at this point. Now it's possible for me, at the previous steps where these check marks are shown, I could actually go through and I could remove a couple things. If there was a subfolder here that I wasn't really interested in having loaded, then I could make exceptions by unchecking the box. At this point, I don't have that luxury. So in those previous steps, I could interact with that dialog box and remove those folders and subfolders or even discrete documents from the loading process. If you had some stuff that was kind of mixed in that you didn't want to load at this point, maybe load it later or not at all, then you can make that selection in those previous dialogues. This dialog doesn't allow that. There's no interaction here. It does, however, allow you to get a different view on the data that's here. So you can see here, it's showing me all the data in all the folders in that that directory that we browsed it to. I could, if I wanted to, change and say, just show me the inventor data or just show me library files, because we might want to start loading documents into the Vault by type. Why not get all your libraries in first? Why not go ahead and get all your parts in before you do the assemblies and the drawings? So you could filter at this point and do multiple runs at this, loading things into the Vault by their type. And that's helpful. So we get a nice utility that allows us to do that. So I could filter the data, and that filter would then identify the things that are about to be uploaded, because that's our next step, and leave the other things behind and maybe to be loaded later. There's another thing that we might want to consider here is a visualization file that gets generated. When we check a CAD file into the Vault, it gets a lightweight visualization file created so that it as a kind of a convenience for us to use as a preview in the Vault environment. It's a DWF file. We also can create visualization files in the PDF type. And so if you're used to having PDFs that you create manually of your drawings when you're done with them or something, then this could be purposed to accomplish that. It does take some time. It's a separate process. And so in our case here today for the demonstration, I won't be creating those visualization files on upload. They can be added or generated after the fact once you've got those documents in Vault. But know that that's something that you could be doing. So here's the very gratifying uploading process. And at this point, the data has been sent through several integrity checks and given you several opportunities along the way to either include or exclude data that is in that directory. So you really have a lot of flexibility as to funneling or filtering things out that you might want loaded, or certainly filtering things out that you may not want loaded at this time as well. You can see the data set, the size of the data set that we're using here is 300, 400 files. There is a recommendation that when you're doing auto loading, you may not want to pick more than about 30,000 documents for a single load. And there are lots of reasons for that. The amount of time it takes to do the processing, the exposure to maybe the traffic on the network with latency and drop packets, slowness that might get created. You don't want to hit it with too much data all at once. And usually that's not the case anyway. Usually you kind of want to segregate it and do it in pieces. The most active stuff that you're doing design work on would be the top priority, and then you can go back and auto load some of the past projects separately from those. So it's something to certainly consider. There is a limitation when it comes to what's recommended, but I'll speak a little bit at the end of our conversation about how you can remove that limitation if you've got massive data sets. So notice that we're done, and we also have because it's Vault and it's very clear and concise and deliberate, it's given us an XML report in a particular directory in the documents folder of the user you're logged in with doing your work here. So I could look at this report and I could see the results of the autoload, what was loaded. Similar to what I could do with that report in the front end of the process, what's broken and can't be loaded would be I'd be notified in the report, that particular report. This one's telling me the one that was actually did it was successful in loading. Choose done here. And that's the end of the loading process. Now that said, probably makes sense to take a closer look at what we just did and what it looks like. What is the outcome of the effort we just made? So I'll launch my Vault Explorer, the Vault client. And I'll log into our Acme Vault. It used to be completely empty. And we'll start to see the information here in the form of the design files that we uploaded. So you can see that there's that designs folder that I added this data to. And whether you're looking, in this hierarchy of folders on the left, or whether you're double clicking and browsing down in over here on the main panel, it doesn't matter. The data is all here. In fact, I can go ahead and just have it show me expand all. So you start to see the hierarchy that was loaded, the documents that were loaded in, and where they're in place in the document or in the vault. So at this point, these documents are vaulted and ready for a user to pick up and start making change to in the new vaulted environment. So let's take a look at one of these designs. I'll just find something that's fairly simple. So we'll go with, I'll pick this one at first. We'll take a look at maybe a couple of these designs. So here's a gearbox assembly that's been drawn in AutoCAD. And if I wanted to take a closer look at maybe that gearbox assembly, I could just simply highlight it. And then in the lower panel, you start to see information about that gearbox assembly. So let's see. In reporting right now, I don't want to be in reporting. So here is a DWG file. Again, it's a drawing document, and you can start to see the history of this file. Now, this was just uploaded moments ago, and it was done by me with my administrator account. So you start to see that. There's a brief thumbnail preview here, and you can see that the history of that is that it has been loaded, checked in at this time and date, and it was done by the Autoloader process. So that the Autoloader itself is documenting what it's doing here, which is how it generates the report for us. So I could look through history on a file like this and determine, when this thing was loaded from that shared folder on the server to the vault. I could also check other things like uses, right? If a file uses something, or if it's used somewhere, then you start to see those relationships. Let me find something that has actual hierarchy in it. Yeah, so here's one. I'm doing a where used on this document here, and you can see that it has children. And so the parent and child relationships between uses and where used are built in by the nature of just adding this to the vault. So this particular document is used in a higher level assembly, or this assembly uses children, I should say, and those children documents are shown here. So by adding this to the vault, I really, just by loading it, get a lot of great information the searching capabilities, et cetera. I won't go too deep into what the Vault's capable of, because that's a whole nother topic for another time. But just a quick look at the workflow here. Let me go back to this one and just kind of step through the workflow process real quickly on something like this. So there's a drawing. It may or may not have children. At this point, if I wanted to do some work on that, I could just simply check the file out from Vault using the open command. It would then go out and launch the appropriate CAD tool. So in this case, it's launching AutoCAD Mechanical. So here's the document open in AutoCAD Mechanical. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, that's the document I thought it was. That's the document I was hoping to get. This is the document that I want to make some changes to. So I checked the file out initially. I could do it now. I could open the file and then check it out for editing once I was sure it was the document I was looking for, but I was relatively certain this was the one I was going to make modifications to. And you can start to see that the Vault is engaging my AutoCAD environment. So in this panel, I'm shown information about the vaulted document, and it's showing me its current status. And I'm just going to go ahead and make a change to this. I'll just delete something just for fun, because that's easy and it's easy to see. So I'll just delete that view. And then I can go ahead and I can either save my changes, or I can go ahead and also do things like I'll get logged into the Vault here. Here I'm in the Vault tab. I'll log in. And then I can do something like check the file back in. So I've got the document checked out to me. I've made an edit to it. And now I'm going to just check the file back in, because I've done what I was asked to do in making those changes. Some controls here. Again, I won't spend too much time in that information, but it's just how do you want to respond and react? How do you want to treat that document now that you've got it checked out and made edits to it? It's saying, well, the file hasn't been changed, so we probably should go ahead and save it. Would you like to do that? It's the only way I can check it in is if you save it first. So it's offering us that. It's the information, it's the details that in the process need to be accomplished, but it's not a tedious task to accomplish these things. So there it is. There's the file. It's been edited. It's been checked back in. And if I now come back into the Vault Explorer, I can see what was done and who did it, and what the results were. So here I am in that altered file now. It's been edited. It's been checked back in. And it's ready for someone else maybe to check. Now that it's been checked out and modified and checked back in, maybe we're ready to inform someone in the organization that, can you give me a look at that work that I did? Is it what you wanted? And then it can go off into production. So just a little bit of kind of close-ending the workflow itself. Loading data through the process of checking its integrity, preparing it, mapping it for its location in the Vault environment, and then ultimately working inside the Vault to take advantage of all the capabilities that it has in order to provide and kind of mandate a workflow in your organization that maybe you're just not able to implement manually now. So hopefully that's been helpful. There is one other thing that I kind of wanted to talk about before we come to kind of wrap things up. And that is, what do we do if we've got more than the 30,000 files, or we've got terabytes of data, and we really can't figure out how to slice it and dice it so that it's 30,000 document chunks? Well, we've got a partnership with a company that makes a really great set of utilities, and it's not just one product that they have, but it's a complete toolkit essentially that you can use and bring to bear. And we use it with our customers frequently when they have more complex environments, when it's not just as simple as here's the files, we need to clean up a few things, and then they're involved. If you've got transformation of the data that needs to occur, or it might be significant, maybe you're getting data out of an existing data management tool that you're hoping to phase out and make the move over to using Vault. Well, those things can be a real challenge. And so there's a company, Cool Orange, you saw their logo as it was kind of going through the PowerPoint initially. And they are a great group of people to work with. In fact, their business came into being the foundation of the company, and the intelligent folks that work over there were some of the guys that originally authored Vault in the Autodesk environment. So they know the data well, and they have a toolkit or several tools that they can bring to bear. If you wanted us to take your data, come up with a process for you, and do much more complex uploads and parsing of your data, validation in huge data sets, then that's the way you can go. If you don't have that need, then you can use the workflow that I've just shown. Hopefully that's maybe demystified a little bit of the process. How do we get there from here? We're thinking about implementing Vault, but what does that look like? How much effort is involved with something like that? What are the tools we can use? And some of them come right out of the box with Inventor, and there are certainly others that we can bring to bear on the more complex tasks that you might have. Maybe getting data from, once the data gets into Vault, we would really like to load that into our ERP system. We want our CAD data to be, the gold standard for organization, and we want to get the ERP system loaded up with the data bill of materials information from our designs. And so those are the kinds of things that we can help with if you've got those situations, needs, and desires. Thanks so much for your attention today. I hope it's been informative and helpful, and not too tedious to go through the picks and clicks on. But I wanted to make sure that I got this detailed information out and not be a silo of knowledge that doesn't share. Thanks so much for your attention. Everyone have a great day.